It's Not Another Buffalo Podcast, hosted by three of the most underqualified sports personalities this side of the canal. With John.
There's no way in hell that I can leave that in, right?
You don't think so?
Well, to quote Rage Against the Machine, what better place than here? And, what better time than now?
And Brando.
We have this trust built on, whatever it is, like Bibles and gold bricks and whatever Brandon Bean's drinking over there.
All right, welcome back to Not Another Buffalo Podcast. We got a unique episode for you guys today. This is actually about a 20-minute tangent that I cut out of last week's episode. It was so off topic and such an interesting debate. I thought, why not cut it out of this and make it into its own episode? Plus, I was unable to record this week, so it's kind of a bonus episode of sorts that otherwise would have been a week off for us. So one last thing real quick before we get to it, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Small City Realty. If you're looking to buy, sell, or manage property in Western New York, you know who to call. Zach Korzelius, 585-409-1088, 585-409-1088, or contact him at Zachary at smallcityrealestate.com. So without further ado, here is our spirited debate from last week.
So here's my question for you guys. And we've talked about this since we've done the show. We talked about it as friends when the Bills would get eliminated before we did the show. Brandon Bean and McDermott have always been so critical on their last game that they've played. It's what they don't have gets them eliminated, or what their flaws are cost them. We make the Diggs trade after we lose to the Texans when we're throwing to Duke Williams 14 times.
Right.
You make the Vaughn trade after you lose in 13 seconds.
You can't get a pass rush.
You can't get a pass rush. You draft back-to-back tight ends in this first and second round, or second and third round, whatever it was.
Draft defensive back. What is it?
Yeah, Kyrie.
2022.
Yeah, you got to go get a pass catcher in Kincaid. Yeah. So, they've been very indicative on visualizing what they need after this final game. My question to you boys is, does Brandon Bean sit up there and watch his defense get torched again and again and again to the tune of 36 points against per game in these elimination games? No matter what, you've heard me say this: 40 drives, 22 touchdowns, 9 field goals, 2 missed field goals, and like 2 punts in 40 drives of elimination games. At what point does Brandon Bean say, God, we keep getting eliminated, our defense keeps letting up 35 points, maybe I shouldn't just go get Myles Garrett, maybe I should go get a different head coach? At what point do you think like that as a GM? I feel like you have to think like that as a GM. I feel like
they're a package deal of sorts, though.
I think McDermott was there first, right? So
yeah.
we're there 1A and 1B. I agree with that. But how do you, as an evaluator of your team, you make these calls on player personnel based on how you lose these games? How do you view that from an objective standpoint as a GM to be like, hey, Sean, maybe it's not Myles Garrett that you need here.
I think this has been a pattern, issue, though. Like I would go out on a limb and say it's a depth issue. I mean,
it's a depth issue for 6 years in a row that they've been eliminated from the playoffs.
And whatever, what ifs don't matter. But if we had Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford playing in the 16 seconds game, or 16, I'm losing my mind, 13 seconds game,
yeah,
never happens.
I'm not an excuses person, man. I don't know.
I just feel like on the defensive line, defensive backs, that drop off, that second rotation of players is just not. I mean, I guess a case could be made for the defensive backs if you're talking like, I don't know, Cam Lewis, or like, I guess Cole Bishop didn't play terribly, but like, right. I don't know. I just feel like depth-wise.
We didn't have Vaughn. Trey White has been injured. Didn't have Benford, or didn't have Bernard. We had AJ Klein. So I'm just, every NFL team has to deal with injuries. I'm just sitting from a GM's chair and I'm watching the defense every year, and the common denominator is McDermott give up 36.5 points per game in games that I'm eliminated in. And he is so good at evaluating things that they need to have differently to do better the next year. At what point do you say, hey, coach, can we talk? What are we doing? Can we do something different here? Because I'm getting you different guys every year. I don't know. I don't mean to go on a tangent here and take 7 minutes of your time here, but I just thought, what do you think about that, John? What do you guys think?
I don't know. I feel like you kind of have that conversation a little bit every year, but it's never to the point of like, we need to look somewhere different, unless that was your fatal flaw. which again, over the pattern of that, like that might be the common denominator there.
It is.
But again, like you can make a separate excuse for every single year. It's not like, oh, we've had this star-studded defense every single year and people have been healthy and we've given up that many points. It's like there's like a different asterisk to every one of these games. You know, we were missing linebackers this game, or Christian Benford got concussed early in this game.
All I'm saying, man,
Kyrie Elam's out there getting torched.
You can sit here and be in a relationship and give every single excuse to your significant other until you're 80 years old and you're miserable, and there's 4 billion other women in the world that you could have chosen, and you made all these excuses and now you're unhappy. And you know, we don't get 80 years with Josh Allen. We got 6, 7 more, 8 more.
Not to just play devil's advocate for the fun of playing devil's advocate here, but also, you know, everyone in any relationship knows that nothing's ever going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. That person's not going to be perfect. Both of you are going to have flaws. And it's not necessarily maturity.
Flaws. You lost in 13 seconds. That's like you're cheating on me with my brother, man. Like I don't have any more excuses. I don't have any more leeway for you, Sean. I'm sorry, dude. I do like you as a coach, and like you have all said, but how many, like, okay, your girlfriend just totaled your car. Accidents happen. That's fine. Okay. Your girlfriend just like,
there is you could make the lack of accountability parallel here too. Like Sean didn't come out and say, Sean is not like Brandon Beane. I feel like if Brandon Beane was the coach, he's very transparent with things. He would have come out and said, hey, I radioed to the special teams coordinator that we were supposed to kick it out of bounds, and this is where the communication broke down. Or maybe it was Leslie that called those plays and had people in off coverage and stuff wasn't communicated. And it's a combination of like, okay, we weren't in the perfect play call, and also there was a miscommunication between, who was it? Levi Wallace at that point it would have been, and Jordan Poyer on that play, or Micah Hyde. Like they were, you know, motioning things. So it's like this series of unfortunate events.
This all goes to bed if you just squib it. I don't know. I'm just saying, man, how much leeway do you get? And I don't think you can settle. I just don't think you can settle when you have Josh Allen. And we've made it. I think we've said it before. I think he gets one more try. I think you get one more chance. Go to your marriage counseling. Go study from Mike Ditka's defense. I don't care what you do, but you got one more chance at this, because otherwise we just wasted Josh Allen's 20s.
That's true. I mean,
is he Farwell at fault for Sean McDermott's, you know, overall game plan that excludes that kickoff with 13 seconds left? I feel like
head coach is responsible for everyone, man.
I understand why my cousin won't come on the show, because he's a William and Mary grad and works in scouting for the Commanders, and he probably knew that this is what would happen. But we gotta have a conversation.
To go off the rails here, I just had the question, and I thought we've all talked about how good Brandon Beane is at identifying the problems on this team after the games that we lose to eliminate us. But I think at some point you got to be like, he has to put a little responsibility on himself, right? He knows his first round picks haven't hit, some of his moves haven't been great, but some of them have been great. But I think when you're playing chess, man, it's the person who's moving the pieces on the field.
Of course. Yeah. But what's the opportunity cost here? What's the risk if you switch that other person? If I'm Tom Holland and I'm dating or engaged to Zendaya, right? And I'm just like, things aren't perfect. Like if I'm Tom Holland and I'm like, well, I think I can get, I don't know, insert person here. And then you're like, okay, well, I'll just burn this bridge right here to try to move up. And then all of a sudden, Tom Holland was a bad example because Tom Holland can get whoever he wants. But like average Joe, like you or me or something like that, you burn that bridge with the person that things weren't perfect with, but you did like, then you're not with that person anymore. And you're like, oh, remember the good old days when we had this person? And like,
how do you know unless you don't do it?
Careful what you ask for, though. It's a Lindy Ruff situation, low key.
That's a really good parallel, Pat. Like it could be, you know, like the Sabres and probably would not have a 12-year playoff drought if they had kept Lindy around for a little bit longer, right?
Well, the part about that is, you know, Lucic runs Ryan Miller, and they traded Derek Roy, Thomas Vanek, Jason Pominville to get John Scott, Steve Ott, and Pat Coletta on an extension. And then, you know, they want to be tough, and then they lose like 15 in a row, and it's like, okay, bye, Lindy. Like, okay, No, that was management trying to do something stupid. But I think about, the Chargers go 5-12 with Brandon Staley, and then Harbaugh comes in and goes 11-6. I don't know. It's like, I feel like people work through more things than they should. You shouldn't have to work through things all the time. It should be working. People give themselves a badge of honor for working through things. Maybe this is me coming from the single 30-year-old man here with no children, but I think settling happens all the time, and it's a bad thing to do, and you don't know it. And if you make a bad choice, just do it again. You have a 2-year, fire a coach after 2 years like the Sabres do now. But the NFL, these assistant coaches are, Ben Johnson is coveted. Do you think Ben Johnson's going to fail, or do you think the Bears are going to fail Ben Johnson? Right?
What do you think about this metaphor? If you're the Eagles and you moved on from Andy Reid to hire Chip Kelly?
Well, they still win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, with not with Chip, with
a lot of years later, though. A lot of years later, though, right? 10 years after they fire Andy Reid, maybe.
Chip Kelly was a terrible person to hire.
When did Andy Reid leave the Eagles? 2012, 2013,
2011, I think. Yeah,
2011. So 6 years. 6 years. You win it. 2 head coaches later,
I guess. 2 head coaches. Yeah.
Ultimately, it's worth it. You win 2 of them within.
Do you think they would have won it sooner though with Andy Reid? Like, how would you grade coaches right now? Would you take Nick Sirianni or Chip? I know this is totally hilarious.
I think they're both clowns.
They just played in a Super Bowl, but no, I'm not talking.
I would take Howie Roseman because that team was effing stacked. That's who I would take. Shout out Howie.
No, but would you take Sirianni? You can have your pick, Sirianni or Doug Peterson. You can take Doug Peterson or you can take Nick Sirianni, or you can have Andy Reid. Who do you pick at this point?
Howie Roseman is GM. I don't think it really matters. Like, both Super Bowl teams are stacked. Like, I don't know.
That's true. A lot of their success is due to the GM. But
I just think you can't be afraid to make a change if you're hitting your head on the ceiling. And whether you're in a relationship, you're at a job, you're hiring a staff, you need to not be afraid to make that change, because you have seen it. What if you're John Gruden or Jake? Which one is the one that's out of the league now with Barstool?
John Gruden.
So John gets traded and he has to beat his old team, and he didn't want to get traded. He just talked about this in a podcast, and he's like, well, they traded a 1st and 2nd round pick for me, so I didn't have any draft picks when I came in there. All my buddies were on the Raiders. I couldn't take the staff there with me, and everybody loved Tony Dungy for the Tampa Bay Bucks. So I'm coming in here as a bad guy, and it turns out I got to play my own team in the Super Bowl. Like, it's crazy. I didn't want any of this to be like this, but it worked out. It still happens.
I mean, There's John Gruden's dad also was a player personnel director for the Bucks. Fun fact, but.
I think there's more examples of teams winning after moving on from a long-term coach. You think of
how many, I was going to say a better example might be somebody who did it in the middle of somebody's Hall of Fame career. Like, it's like Josh Allen is on that trajectory right now. Like, that's one benefit you have as the Eagles, where it's like, you're kind of looking at a franchise reset after Carson Wentz isn't your guy, right? Yeah. So you can bring in a new head coach and say, hey, we're going to change stuff around, where it's like, you're mid Josh Allen and you have a coach that is getting him consistently into the 2nd round of the playoffs every single year, and you really just need more shots at it. And you're probably going to get there at some point, but you really just need more darts thrown at the dartboard. And not to mention that you've run into the second dynasty of the 21st century as your opponent in all these playoff games too. So it's like, I don't know. I if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I know it's kind of broke, but it's also like, there's a chance you're pulling out a part and then they don't make that part anymore, and then you're screwed.
Yeah, but you could look at it. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I guess Mike Shanahan would be a good example too. You take, John Elway's last 5 years, Mike's there, that you win too. But Brandon, look at it this way though, right? So imagine, and I'm whatever, I'm a dad now. I don't really get out too very much. Go to play Yu-Gi-Oh on Wednesdays. But imagine, right? You're in great shape, and every Sunday you go to the coolest, most hip bar in the city. You don't even pay the cover charge. There's like a balcony and some shit. I don't even know, right? So you're in there, and you talk to some ladies, and it doesn't work out 7 times in a row. But at least you're in the club, the exclusive club. You're not paying a cover charge, just a balcony in the club. Eventually, the 9th time, the 10th time, You might find 10. Someone you have a connection with.
You only get 10 tries, man. That's the whole thing. You only get 12 tries. If I'm going 0 for 8, I'm doing something massively different for 9 through 12. That's all I'm saying.
You're going to Denny's and
I don't know, get a haircut, shave my beard, start working out to not be so skinny. I don't know what it is, but I think that's the only thing that I'm saying is at what point do you sit here and say defense is not winning us a game? We need to score 40. Give me Ben Johnson to run this team and get to 40 before the Chiefs do.
Well, you can't have Ben Johnson.
Whoever,
at this point,
example A there,
Yeah,
Bobby Sloan.
Next year.
That's another thing.
I think the answer to that question is next year if it ends the same way.
Okay,
that's like a whole paradox in itself, though, too, because you think about like Eric Bieniemy, like, oh my God, he was so coveted, not very good as a coach, and then you think
didn't he have some personal stuff going on? Didn't he have something happen?
Yeah, just getting behind the wheel when he shouldn't have and stuff. But then you think about oh goodness, who's the guy in Kansas City? He was the terrible head coach. Well, he wasn't even that bad really in Chicago. Matt Nagy. Like I don't think he's he's not going to be super desired. Like I feel like it's all relative to. Like same thing with Bobby Babich. Do you think like you were just calling Sean McDermott out on his defensive play calling, but he's not even the defensive coordinator. So I guess there's a lot of nuance to where the responsibility and where the praise and blame should be placed.
It's a tough conversation. And like you said, nuance, I think is the perfect word because nuance is the reason we started this conversation at the 30-minute mark. And now we're at the 50-minute mark and we've still got 3 left on the list.
Go ahead, John. Give us number 3.
It's a good conversation. Honestly, like we could have done a whole episode on that. Maybe, I don't know. Hopefully everyone's still with us. Otherwise I'd cut that whole section out and then make it its own episode for next week. Actually, I'm going to be out of town. So maybe I'll like check out that meandering next week, but I don't know. It's a good debate, and I think it's one that's been around for years and doesn't seem to get any easier to answer, especially after, again, Brandon, you're right. Like, look, find the pattern. Humans are good at finding patterns. That's the constant there through all those years. It hasn't been Josh Allen's performance, that's for sure.
I can rip on McDermott all day long, but I don't want him fired yet. Like I said, he got one more. You got one more shot.
Just think about the cool club you're getting to go in every Sunday.
Yeah, and guess what? The cooler club that I don't get to go in on the 3rd floor that Pat Mahomes is just owning. True. I don't get to go in that one, and that's where all the fun happens. So I want to go up
but
to that
even
one.
A higher chance of getting rejected at that club too. So
I'd rather get rejected in that club than in this current one. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. If you ever have a question you want to ask us or a topic you want us to cover, shoot us an email at notanotherBillspodcast@gmail.com. That's notanotherBillspodcast@gmail.com, or DM us on Instagram at NotBuffPodcast. If you enjoy listening, please consider leaving us a nice review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you don't really enjoy the show, I have no idea why you're still listening, but to everyone out there, do good, be good, God bless, and go Bills.
Onions in the summer, cabbage in the fall. He's just a CEO that's wearing overalls.